that talks about sports and other topics relatable to sports fans. Joining me this week is co-host Sean McLean.
Hello, hello, hello. How's everyone doing?
All right. So we there was a very busy week in the NHL this with the trade deadline coming and going. What thoughts do you have? We're gonna go division by division. We're gonna start with the East Division since that's local. What are your thoughts on that?
The East Division, in my opinion, is the division where the big moves happen. In the East Division, you had is where the Taylor Hall movement was. Where was he going to go? That was the big fish on the market. And the players who were involved, you had the Islanders, you had the Bruins who were involved. Were the Rangers and Flyers? Are they going to be sellers and buyers with where they are in the standings? To me, that was the division that was kind of most important to watch, and I think right now that's been the most uh, challenging division in all of the NHL right now.
Absolutely. I think that's the major consensus is that's the lumberjack division. What we saw the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. I think for the most part, and we saw the Capitals. Maybe the Capitals made the most bold and head scratching move when they moved Anthony Mantha from the Detroit Red Wings, and they moved him for Stanley Cup champion Jacob Vrana. Was it Richard Panik in a first and a second? I mean, that was huge. I think the way the trade needs to be looked at was it was Mantha and cap space traded to Detroit for that haul. I think that was a lot of what social media they didn't really understand that the richness of the deal came from the salary cap relief that's all so important in this day and age.
Well, looking at that trade, a lot of people, when you take it at face value, a lot of people are kind of like, well, what the hell? Like Stevie Y just fleeced,
Yeah.
Washington, and it's not that. It's if you've been watching Caps games and you've been watching Red Wings games, Verana is a player who seems to have kind of fallen out of favor in Washington a little bit. Same thing with Anthony Mantha. Anthony Mantha is a good, solid player. The thing with Anthony Mantha is what the Red Wings know, and this is, kudos to Stevie Y for this. With the way Anthony Mantha's contract is structured, by the time the Red Wings become competitive, he's going to be on the downward trend of 35 or whatever, you know? So essentially, while he's got a decent contract, while he's still good, you can take Anthony Mantha and trade him for other pieces that are still going to be good or on the other side of 35, once the Red Wings become competitive again, as well as getting some picks in the process. So, good move. Also, Verana I think he's a 30 goal scorer at least once or twice. So, you gonna see maybe, I'm not saying that, he's not as good a goal scorer as Anthony Mantha, but there's I prefer Verana, but for the Caps, Mantha brings what Verana didn't have, which is size. So that's something that the Caps were lacking with him, and the Caps have gotten size. So I honestly think it's a solid trade for both sides. I was like a lot of people on Twitter Nation. I was a little bit like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
But
No, but the big thing is Panik's Richard Panik. It was his contract. His contract was huge and it was almost untradeable. So you had to make it sweeter. All right, you're gonna take Panik's contract, but you're also gonna take Verana and a number one and a number two, all for Mantha himself. And in doing that, it was big. What we saw in this deadline was the few teams who had cap space were using that to their advantages to get picks to build toward the future and to also help the bigger teams. And the bigger teams, the bigger teams were just trying to get stronger for the cup run. And Detroit was one of those ones that had cap space, and they used it to their advantage here. And I think it's an amazing move moving forward for them.
yeah, no, it definitely is. It's again, at face value, this trade's kind of but
Yeah.
as you really sit down and think about it, you're like, okay, this is a trade that worked out equally well for both sides. Maybe 3 years down the road when Detroit becomes competitive again, they'll be able to build and they'll have pieces underneath control for it because they'll be all those draft picks will be RFAs instead of UFAs.
Yeah, right now they have in the next 2 years they have 7 picks in the first 3 rounds, which is going to be absolutely huge.
Yeah, no, that's you gotta build, right?
Yeah.
So how else are you gonna build without picks?
Yeah, they have their farm is very very bad at this point, so that's hurting them, and they're working toward it. But let's get back to the East now. So the New York Islanders actually made a move before we went on air last week. Was Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac from the New Jersey Devils heading over to the other side of the Hudson?
Yes. So this is nice because they're not going to need to change their houses or anything. They could possibly stay where they're living and just commute to Long Island.
I think a lot of these moves were made having to work around the COVID factor. I think this was one of those moves. I think because they were in such a close proximity, they were like these guys were able to go the next day to their respective locker rooms, and they were actually able to play the next day that night that we were on air.
If I remember correctly, originally, between the borders, if you were to trade between the borders, it was a 14-day quarantine for anyone going into Canada, and then a 7-day quarantine for anyone coming into the States.
Yeah.
Amongst teams, there was supposed to be like a 7-day quarantine. So, there was a lot of talk about like the trades having to come sooner than later, because if your trades come late, depending on what that trade deadline week schedule is going to look like, it could be like 3 games before guys are able to play. I think they scratched though that 7-day quarantine window after the trades, like a week before the deadline. And I say that because there are a couple of guys on this list who got traded within the states and were in the lineup for their team's games, this week.
Yeah, I think it was team specific. I know that Brandon Montour, who is a defenseman for the Buffalo Sabres, was traded to the Florida Panthers, and he has yet to suit up. He's actually going to suit up tonight. So I think it was just different rules between different states and things like that. But that one benefit of this actual trade here was that they were able to go so fast to their respective teams.
Yes, not to bring up the Anthony Mantha situation again, but for example, there's a trade that happened on deadline day, and he's already played a game with the Wings, and
already scored a goal.
He's already scored. So like instant gratification there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And whatnot. But with this trade, going back to the New York Islanders and what their identity is of being a hard team to play against. Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac, the 2 guys that they acquired, New Jersey kept 50% salary, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
The other thing about these guys are Lamoriello players. I believe Zajac was drafted by Lamoriello, has played his whole career. That's a Lamoriello guy.
Yeah.
If we talk about Kyle Palmieri, I know he played in Anaheim, then came over to Jersey. The Kyle Palmieri is supposed to be like the Anders Lee replacement for the net front presence. He's not as big as Anders, but he's a grindy player. He's got a pretty good shot. He's averages, I think, about like 25 goals a season normally. He's good for. These are 2 guys who just like fit the Islanders system.
Yeah.
Like this is how the Islanders like to play. Not jumping the gun, but supposedly the Islanders had the package that where I want to go with this? Yes, the package that the Buffalo Sabres got for Taylor Hall. The Islanders were offering up what they gave to New Jersey, and supposedly Buffalo turned it down. And this is we went to Jersey and he got this. But the other thing about the Jersey players, the current general manager of New Jersey, former New York Islander player. So maybe, along with there being the Lamoriello connection, there's just connections all with this trade, hence maybe why they kept 50% salary.
All right, so you're a New York Islanders fan. Last week, I went off and I was talking about my displeasure for the fact that the New York Islanders and the New Jersey Devils do not have the same kind of rivalry within each other that either one of those teams has toward the New York Rangers. Like every time the New York Rangers are doing good. Both of those teams pretty much join in together, and they just like it's like a Justice League kind of coalition over there that goes against the Rangers, and then. But once the other two are doing good, they kind of like push each other to do good, like root on each other and different things like that. I don't understand why there's not like just a three-way death match of rivalry there, or why it's like that. Well, can you explain to me at least have some thoughts in there?
It's got a couple things going on. One of them for sure is definitely the proximity between the Prudential Center and Madison Square Garden, as compared to the proximity of Prudential Center and like Nassau Coliseum. Like there have been days where I've gone to a Ranger game years before at was like a 1 p.m. start, and the Rangers are playing, the Flyers or whoever. And then, all right, I got tickets for the Jersey game at 6 p.m. later that night, and I hop on a train, go 2 stops into Jersey, and in 20 minutes, I'm at the Prudential Center for another hockey game. So, like you got a lot of people from Jersey, from the Newark area where the arena is, coming to the city to work, and vice versa with the New Yorkers. So there's just the proximity there of like where the state line is. The Islanders are a little bit different. We're both city guys. It's
Right.
a lot harder to get to Nassau Coliseum than it is to get to the Prudential Center from the heart of Manhattan. Is it not?
That's the truth.
And you know what? I don't own a car. I take mass transit everywhere. It takes almost like 2 hours from the heart of Manhattan to get to Nassau Coliseum. Traffic, it could take up to 2 hours, and a lot of people don't want to go to Nassau Coliseum stuck in traffic, and then another hour and a half back home to Jersey, depending on like how far you are. So I think the rivalry's not as intense because a lot of Jersey fans aren't willing to take that trip out to Nassau Coliseum, I feel like, to go to those games, unless you're going to get tickets for dirt cheap. But since the Islanders are a little bit more competitive now, those tickets aren't like what they used to be about like 5 years ago.
Well, if I look at the most maybe comparable situation, there's a couple of examples. But if we look at let's say the state of California, there's three teams. There's the San Jose Sharks, Los Angeles Kings, and Anaheim Ducks. All of those franchises seem to hate each other equally. Like they don't seem to have any kind of, like they all, once they're in the playoffs, they want to see them really go down. But it doesn't seem like there's any kind of like connection between either one of those teams that really goes against the other side. Like they all just have a triple threat match, a hatred between all of them. But for some reason, the Islanders and the Devils, they have like this kind of like unwritten friendship rule kind of thing, and like respect and all this other kind of thing. I don't like it. I would rather them everybody, because everybody hates the Rangers, which is fine. I understand. We understand why the Devils hate the Rangers. We understand why the Islanders hate the Rangers. But why don't the Devils and the Islanders hate each other?
Well, think about it this way, man. Like when the Devils got good with Martin Brodeur, in like the early 2000s, the Islanders didn't get good until maybe like 4 years ago. Yeah. So you have like the fish sticks era of like 1996 and on, and it's just sucky Islander team all the way up until basically the Johnny Boychuk Nick Leddy trade that Garth Snow makes, and all of a sudden like they're good. You do have a couple of playoff appearances, but like with John Tavares, but all those playoff appearances, other than those series that they won against Florida, they were basically an 8th seed. They played the Pittsburgh Penguins that one year, got knocked out. They were an 8th seed. And then, they played Florida at Barclays and wound up getting the playoff series one, but then they got knocked out by Tampa Bay the next round.
Right.
So I think again, remember now, hatred, when you have two good teams that play against each other, then the hatred's going to come. If you go back to those California teams, remember now, the Kings were good when the Ducks were good. When your teams are good, people file into the buildings to go to games, and you get more crowd. People get rowdy and whatnot. When teams are bad, if you got one good team versus one bad team, people aren't filing into the building to see a sucky team play. It is what it is. Do I want to watch the Rangers and Devils play each other, knowing that one team's good and one team's not, or do I want to watch two bad teams play?
All right. Well, I look forward to the day that the Islanders and the Devils really have like like they're both really good and they're just like going at it and they both hit each other and I want to be sitting there with my popcorn laughing my ass off the whole time. That's what I'm looking forward to because I just like when I see it, a lot of times it's like, like they'll, let's say we got like social media posts and you'll have like a Devils fan like trashing the Rangers, then you have an Islanders fan trashing the Rangers, and then they both like high fiving each other. Basically, it's like, hey, well, like, what's going on here?
Well, listen, everyone, think about the hatred of original six teams. Everyone hates original
I
six
understand.
teams.
I understand the reasons why everybody hates the Rangers. I just don't understand why don't they just hate each other? And that, like when that happens, I'm gonna be happy when that happens, whenever that is. So let's move on. So we have the Pittsburgh Penguins. They ended up adding Jeff Carter, who's in Los Angeles Kings.
I couldn't quite understand this deal. I know LA retained some salary on that. I don't know how much it was. I think it was 50%. But the funny story here is that you got a playoff contender in the Pittsburgh Penguins who now have Jeff Carter and Ron Hextall as their general manager, two ex-Flyers. No one sees the irony in that going on there.
Yeah, I think it's hilarious. But the one thing I take away from this trade is just you're basically adding on a veteran at the cheap, which is great. And I think I spoke about it last week. When a winning team is in their position, one of the benefits of actually being a winning competitive team is that you're able to have like these little cheap deals come in, or you want like veterans that'll just come to play for you, no matter what. This is a situation here where it's like a veteran presence going into a situation, and you have like Evgeny Malkin who's skating right now, so he's theoretically close to returning, and they're already hot. Like they've went through the bottom of like they went from the swimming around the bottom of the division all the way up to the top in like relatively no time, and now they're fighting for first place. So you're adding on a veteran who can score, who has like Stanley Cup experience, and yeah, it's a pretty good deal for them, I think. So the Boston Bruins adding on Tyler Hall.
This was the big fish. This was the guy who everyone was concerned about on the market. Who was the second piece in that deal again?
Bjork.
Bjork. Yes. So it's Tyler Hall.
Anders Bjork, I think.
Yes, and Anders Bjork for a second round pick.
And Bjork actually had an assist in his game. He assisted on the first goal of the game that it was actually Boston and
it was Boston
Sabres
versus Buffalo.
Each other. Yeah, so,
and that game went to overtime. I went to a shootout actually.
So that's another situation where they're already quarantined together, so the players just went into the other locker rooms and they were good to go.
Yes. How do you feel about this Taylor Hall?
I think
to Boston
it was tough. I think because Taylor Hall is an actual rental. Like he's only signed for the rest of the season. He signed a 1-year, $8 million deal at the beginning, basically because the Buffalo Sabres had the salary cap space and they just signed them for the 1 year, and he took it because, hey, I mean, wouldn't you rather get paid $8 million to play 1 year instead of like this? Now we're in a salary cap crisis. Then we have like the pandemic and the attendance records, the revenues, everything is just affected right now. So he stopped. He took the $8 million for 1 year, and this is all you have. So any team acquiring him is not going to have $8 million to pay him again. So where he ends up going, how he ends up structuring his future deals, that's all up in the air. But as for right now, there's not anybody who was going to acquire him that was going to be able to extend him. So at this point, that handcuffed the Buffalo Sabres, and it was kind of hard. It's not like your regular deal where you just pay for a rental because, this is going to be something to push for the Stanley Cup. They waited it out to try to get a better deal. They weren't able to get one. And the Sabres, they just basically got whatever they could. But at the same time, you signed the guy, and you end up getting something for the future. Hopefully, they could get a score high on the number 2, the second round pick, and then they'll be good. If not, then hey, I mean, they signed them for. It wasn't like he was like Taylor Hall was, with the Sabres for like 8 years, 7 or 8 years, and then this is what they got for him.
The rumor on Taylor Hall going back to the off season where he signed with Buffalo, was that he didn't originally want to sign there. It's just he waited too long, and that's all that was left. So, um,
which is possible. That there's not many teams who can pay somebody $8 million for 1 year. It's just not the way. That's,
but
no room.
he's out of a bad situation. So I guess kudos to him. The other thing, in his draft year, it he could have been a Bruin, but they decided to go with Tyler Sagan, if I remember correctly. And he's actually a little upset with that because I believe deep down in his heart he wanted to be a Boston Bruin. Like he wanted to go there. The other thing that no one talks about, Taylor Hall had a no movement clause in his contract. So Taylor Hall's able to control where he wanted to go. And so it doesn't matter what team offered Buffalo a first-round pick because they still had to have Taylor Hall take away his no movement clause in order for him to go to whatever team it was for the pick.
That's true.
So if you think about it, let's be honest, a second-round pick for Taylor Hall is that really what Buffalo was thinking they were going to get? Because if I'm grading it off of that, it's a big fat F.
But you look at his production. I mean, the fact that he's very injury prone and he's actually been healthy this whole year is actually a plus. But you look at the production. The production wasn't there for a first rounder. And
do you know how bad we're talking production? Do you know how many goals?
Yeah, but you're basically giving up a number one pick for 2 months of service, possibly 3 months. All those things. So
it's
all those factors. It's different if you're able to give a number one pick and you're able to, maybe like if you do well now and then we'll extend you. The Boston Bruins already have tons of stars on there. They're not going to be able to pay him $8 million for next year. So, it's a tough bargaining chip, and the Sabres got what they could for him. Boston didn't have to give up more than whatever they gave up. I think it was a good deal.
Well, with Boston, do you feel that Boston is underperforming this year?
I think they have a dearth of defense. One thing is that they're basically outscoring all their mistakes. Like they're throwing in they went to like the fourth string goaltender and Justin was it Swayman. Yeah. They went to their fourth goaltender right now because the other the top two guys, Rask and Halak, have had their injury issues and COVID issues as well. And then the last guy of Valder. Was hot in the beginning. They were winning games with him, and then he ended up falling off a little bit. I think they're doing I think they're overachieving for that factor. It's not they haven't had their main two goaltending tandem, the one that won the Jennings Trophy last year. They haven't had it, both of them, for the whole season. So the fact that they're still winning and still in fourth place right now, clinging on, is pretty good.
I think that Boston is exactly where they're going to be. And I believe that Boston is actually starting to become on the downtrend now. I think, they've had all those years of Marchand, Bergeron, and Chara and being at the top of their division. Well, guess what? This is the first year without Chara. Marchand's getting older. Bergeron's getting older. The defense outside of McAvoy is a little bit paper thin,
And McAvoy even has injury issues right now.
Yeah, so I really think that Boston's starting to I don't want to say come down to earth, but Boston's starting to become now a middle of the pack team, and I think even adding a Taylor Hall, because look, here's the deal. Yeah, this is a guy who won the MVP a couple of years ago, but And sometimes a change of scenery can make you, bring certain skills back and whatnot. But if you look at that team as a whole and how old those guys are getting now, I think the downward trend is where Boston's going to go. The other thing, funny that Boston winds up losing 8-1 to the Caps, and then the general manager's like, all right, we gotta fix the ship right. Yeah. So they go out and they get Taylor Hall a couple hours after that.
I think it was probably more coincidental than anything else, but that is a very interesting point, and I think that the Bruins are just gonna have to win. They're gonna have to score 5, 6, 7 goals to win games, and that's what they're trying to do, because the defense is just so because they even have Matt Grenzlik, who's also he's been in and out of the lineup all year. So they have injury issues to the defense and the goaltending, and all they have is the offense. And the offense is pretty good. They're gonna have to keep scoring. And I actually made a bet with Harris Berger on who's gonna have a better record, the New York Rangers and the Boston Bruins. For a little while there, it looked like the Bruins were gonna blow the Rangers out of the water, but right now they are 4 points behind the New York Rangers are 4 points behind the Boston Bruins, and the Boston Bruins have 2 games in hand. So it's possible.
So
New York Rangers come back.
So hold on. So contender or pretender between the Rangers and the Bruins? Who's your contender and who's your pretender?
I want to say when we did our preseason show leading up to the regular season, I ended up putting the Rangers ahead of Boston, more for my fandom, because obviously I can't really bet against the Rangers, but I wouldn't have been surprised if they, like, right now I'm looking at the standings, they seem to be around what I was thinking. Like, the Rangers would be, middle of the pack in the division. Now that Mika Zibanejad is playing like the number 1 center that we knew he was before the season started, he had that little bit of a rough stretch in the beginning of the season. That totally changes the complexion of the team. So now we're at the point where the Rangers are just scoring, and the goaltending, Shesterkin is doing pretty well right now. I think they're still good, and they're still going to be middle of the pack toward the end of the rest of the year, and hopefully they'll be able to make the playoffs just to get some experience. But at the same time, the biggest thing that's holding the Rangers back is the $13 million in dead salary cap that they have. And next year, they're getting 9 of that back. So that's going to be money to play with for the future.
Speaking of Shesterkin, did you see Shesterkin played against Ilya Sorokin the other day? I don't know if you guys know. Those two were teammates on the CSK Moscow team in the KHL.
Yeah,
that's the team out there who just trucks through everyone in Russia, and just the New York Yankees of the KHL, essentially.
Yeah, I think it's great when the storylines intertwine like that, and now they're both on like a big New York rivalry.
So yeah, that Ranger Islander rivalry is that's looking like that could be real interesting in 2 years, eh?
That's what, yeah. But then we're also looking forward to the Capo Caco versus Jack Hughes, and that has yet to grow to any kind of fruition. And it's still early, but
hot take right here.
Yeah,
get rid of Capo. That's a bust. He's on Nolan Patrick level, in my opinion, right now. I think
when you look at these guys, they're still like 19, 20. They can't even buy beer yet. The one factor I think that everybody's missing is they haven't even grown into their man bodies yet. So there's still time for strength and development. I wouldn't throw all the chips in there yet. Unfortunately, we have these scenarios where Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid, they came in and they were just like awesome right from the start. Not everybody's like that, and the same thing with any kind of draft picks. Nowadays in any sport that you look at, everybody wants, like the number 1 picks to come in, and they want them to be like superstars right away. Like any quarterback who comes in, they got to throw 4,000 yards and 50 touchdowns. It's not realistic.
It's not that I expect them to be superstars right away. It's I expect them to make an impact to the team right away. And with Nolan Patrick and Capo Caco, they have not made impacts to their team right away. Hughes, he's made an impact on Jersey. Of course, you got your Austin Matthews, your Connor McDavid. They've made impacts to their teams right away. If you go back to the Oilers, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins was the number 1 pick, correct?
Yep.
He made an impact to the Oilers right away, I feel. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins versus Capo Caco?
Yeah, I mean, but I think they develop differently. I think that, like Leon Draisaitl, when he started out, he wasn't number 1 pick. He was just picked maybe 5th or 6th. Overall in the draft, but obviously he's the Triple Crown winner last year, and he started out he scored 9 goals in 36 games in his first year. That's not exactly earth-shattering stuff.
I'll take it back even further. John Tavares made an impact right away with the Islanders.
Right, but I think they're exceptions to the rule. I don't think they're the the main part of the rule. Even we could even double back over to Tyler Hall. Tyler Hall is the number one pick. He had his issues with health and staying in the lineup mostly, and then like he was an underwhelming draft pick, and then he goes to New Jersey and he ends up being an MVP one year. That's the potential that everybody saw in him.
See,
It's
but
just
that's the thing.
everything.
Taylor Hall, like that in his time in Edmonton, with him being a number one pick, he still made plays that made you go, wow. I don't see those. I don't see Capo Caco and Nolan Patrick. I don't see those guys like having me go, wow. Phil Hughes, like
Yeah.
he makes me go, wow. He's done a couple things this season that made me go, wow, that's a player right there. Like same thing again, comparing like John Tavares. Wow, even look, Victor Hedman went the same year as John Tavares. He was a number 2 pick that year. All right, Victor Hedman as a number 2 pick. He makes me go, wow.
Yeah.
PK Subban, if I know, was a second rounder. No one predicted PK was going to be as good as he was his first couple years with Montreal. PK always does something, to make people go, wow, whether it's on or off the ice.
Yeah.
So, like, that's what I mean when I say, like, impact player. You don't have to be on a good team, but, like, night in and night out, if you're a number one player, like you're the next. If you're not as a number one pick, you're supposedly supposed to be the next franchise player, the next franchise leader. Theoretically, like you're gonna be a captain of this team one day and lead them. I don't see that from Capo Caco. Lafayette is starting to get into the groove of things, but like even so, like going like a week back, like Lafayette hasn't given me like the wow thing, but I think that kind of has to deal with the fact that the Rangers kind of remind me a little bit of Edmonton from when like they had Taylor Hall and everyone, where just the coaching staff they didn't have the right people to develop the talent on the team and to teach these kids this is what it's like to be an NHL player.
Yeah, I think that's still early. I think there was there's some options where they were kind of too good to just throw into the AHL when they could have, because the number 2 pick, Quentin Bayfield, hasn't been on the Kings all year. He's been he's been playing in the Ontario Reign.
Yes.
So that like that could have benefited. Like what if he comes in and he's a hot shot? He didn't have the same pressures as these other guys who are just coming in to spring in right away. I think everybody develops differently.
I think though that has more to do with the Kings that don't look at themselves as contenders. So if you put him in this year, you burn a year off of his entry-level contract. And, that's essentially what you're doing to rebuild. So remember, if you burn that year of entry-level contract, you're killing your future, because now these entry-level contracts, you have players for at least 4 years or more that are underneath your control. Your ELC is always worth 3 years. Players are restricted free agents at the end of it, meaning to say that other teams can swoop in and sign them, but if another team swoops in and sign your RFA, they got to give up, picks, and again, you're able to rebuild. So that's why a lot of people don't go for your RFAs and whatnot. So depending on what the contract is after that, if it's a monstrous contract, you could be looking at like 10 years control or something like that, at like cost control for a good portion of that. So with where the Kings are right now, knowing that they weren't going to be contenders, why rush your guy up? Lafayette is a little bit different in the sense that like he's NHL ready. Like the way the Rangers have always been, go for it. The Rangers they've never been a rebuilding kind of team. They always usually like trade their picks away, their first round picks, and do what they can in the playoffs. They got lucky with the magic of ping pong balls last.
They did, definitely,
100%.
100%.
So, like you look at all of that, and it's. I understand the Rangers with Lafayette, but in my opinion, though, he's NHL ready, but would maybe a year of like playing with men in the AHL have benefited that guy, or even maybe a couple months? And again, there's other aspects, man. Of guess what? Like this is that COVID year. Like a lot of these kids, the way that the season is structured this year, you're playing your whole 52 game season is all within your division, and you're playing each team in your division 8 times. So he may have the skill, but his hockey IQ might not be where it needs to be yet because he's playing, NHL level. So, when you're playing against guys who have seen you 8 times and have been at the NHL longer, they're gonna, unless you're a generational talent like Sidney Crosby, Alexander Ovechkin, these guys are gonna, catch on to you quick and shut you down week after week. So he's probably having more of an issue adapting to NHL play this season by having seeing the same guys over and over, than like kind of different looks every night.
It's possible. It's possible. Any other thoughts on the East before we move
Um, I have when we get to the end of this, I got my picks on. We still got like a month and a half of the season,
on?
but I have my picks on how I feel the divisions are gonna end. Actually, would you like me to?
I'd say let's get into that now because we're running a little over on time. So go ahead.
All right. So with the East Division, I honestly feel that it's the 1, 2, and 3 is gonna stay what it is right now. Which is Washington number 1, the Islanders number 2, Pittsburgh 3. I honestly do feel that the Rangers are gonna come through and take that 4th spot. Now, I'm an Islander fan. Do I want the Rangers to come through and take that 4th spot? No, 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 no. I would love to sit here and say ha ha, but I just think that Boston is a pretender. I'm not taking them seriously. An underlying stat. The Isles are 5-0 against Boston this season. So there's was it 3 games left against Boston? Even if Boston wins all the remaining games, the Isles still basically won the season series against them.
Yep.
So, just that's how I feel. Oh, also the last 2
Potential
games.
playoff matchup there too. If it does stay the way it is now, because one will play 4 and then 2 will play 3, so they'll be playing in a 7-game series.
Also, be on the lookout. The last 2 games of the seasons for the Rangers against Boston. So that last spot may come down to a 2-game series versus the Bruins.
Wouldn't that be awesome? That would definitely actually works for me if that's the case. So looking at the East though, I mean, how surprising is the Flyers taking a dive? It seems like their solution at goaltending and Carter Hart has just taken a dive with the team, and Elliott seems to be not that great. He comes in, sometimes he's good, sometimes he's not that good. Very inconsistent. The defense is in shambles.
I think the Flyers are exactly where they should be. My thing with the Flyers is that, do you guys remember Ron Hextall being fired not that long ago?
Right.
Ron Hextall was fired in part because he thought Carter Hart wasn't ready and everyone else wanted him to play Carter Hart. What are we seeing right now with Carter Hart? Carter Hart's not ready. He came and he got hot. And the big thing about a lot of goalies, when goalies come up to the NHL level of play, it's so much easier than playing in the AHL or playing in junior because the structure, guys know where to be. And when guys know where to be and the shots are coming from the outside 85 to 90% of the game, and you only got to deal with 10% of the shots coming from high danger areas, it's that much more easier to play in goal. So every goalie will tell you, even though the skill gets harder, it's easier to play at the NHL level in goal than it is at lower levels. So, you get that initial, this isn't too bad. And then when guys, again, figure you out, guess what? You get lit up. And Carter Hart is getting lit up.
Yeah, it's a very interesting take. Actually, I picked them to win a division, and they started out hot, and then it was like, only the Bruins can't beat them, and then after that, everybody just started beating them, and then the Rangers started hanging crazy numbers, video game numbers on them, and then now it's to the point that they just seems like they're not even up for the task.
Listen, when Buffalo beats you at the end of a 18-game losing streak, you got problems.
I was happy about that because then the Rangers lost 2 games after that in overtime against the Sabres, and it was like, no big deal. Nobody even talked about it, So let's move over to the North Division. So right now we have our Toronto Maple Leafs, who have been in the lead the whole time. They added Columbus Blue Jacket captain Nick Foligno.
Yes.
And backup goaltender David Rittich from the Calgary Flames, who was an actual All-Star a couple years ago. So tell me about the Toronto Maple Leafs.
The Toronto Maple Leafs are, I think, they're top of the North Division. The thing about Toronto, though, is that so if you take the top 10 teams in the league, Toronto is, and you take their goals against, Toronto would be sixth with 112 goals against out of the top 10. The big issue with that North Division is that it's a lot of offense. I'm not seeing a lot of defense at all in all those Canadian games I'm seeing played. But you know what? Everyone, on Sportsnet and TSN, those two big Canadian outlets are all, oh, Canada, the Leafs and everything. And I'm like, like no one from this division is making me, say, wow, like they're possibly a big contender. Even the moves that they made, like if you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs is a collection of former captains who have won nothing.
Yeah, this is basically like the Lakers, and you had Karl Malone and Gary Payton come many years ago. Kind of like one of those situations where everybody's just jumping in, trying to band together and get a cup. Toronto Maple Leafs, I think the deals, because they have Jack Campbell now. It seems like the incumbent starter Frederick Anderson is not going to be around for a while. He went from like, oh, he'll be back maybe next game, maybe next game, maybe next game. Now he's on long-term injury reserve, so it seems like he's gone for a while. They end up getting David Rittich, which I think a lot of the Canadian teams had to trade within each other so that they would skip the 7 days to 14 days quarantines.
Yes,
a lot of them had to go with each other, and then the David Rittich trade was actually they traded with the Calgary Flames to get him, and then they were playing the Calgary Flames, and in that same flight they all just flew together. So as a Toronto Maple Leaf, David Rittich was on that plane flying with the team over there, and then he ended up playing them that same. Yeah, he ended up suiting up, and then he played for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Ended up losing in overtime. But that was an interesting story, and I think that was a lot of one of the ways that some of these GMs went around some of these deals. And now, Nick Foligno, who came from the Columbus Blue Jackets, it's gonna take a little while for him to actually suit up and play his first game, even though he was, he was basically, everybody's just hired for the playoffs. But that was I think that was something that was very challenging to a lot of teams in the middle of the pack. Like you have St. Louis Blues. If you can't find the right deal, but you're in the middle of the pack fighting for the playoffs, where every single game and every single 2 points a night is important, you're not gonna try to pull a deal where you're not gonna get a guy for a week or two.
Well,
it just
that's
makes
the
it
thing, though,
unattractive.
man. When you're fourth, right? If you're gonna get in, if third spot is totally unattainable, okay. But if there's an even slight inkling that you could possibly get third, you go for it. And the reason why you go for it, especially, not to go away from the north, but like if you look out west, for example, it's well, the west might be a little bit different, but like out west, your reward for finishing third or fourth is essentially getting Vegas or Colorado.
Yeah.
You know, boom, like you're probably not going to beat those two teams.
Yeah.
Going back to the Metro real quick, your reward for finishing fourth is going to be either the Islanders, Penguins, or the Caps. All three of those teams are good teams, but like all three of those teams could definitely be beat in the first round. Like I feel more comfortable playing any one of those three teams in the Metro in the first round than I would playing Vegas or Colorado.
Yeah, very, very, very top. The West is very top heavy. That's what we all predicted, except that we thought the Blues would be in the position the Wild are right now, and the Wild are actually 9 points up on the Blues, and the Blues are right now fighting for the fourth slot with the Coyotes and the Sharks.
Yes, I think the Sharks are pretenders. The Coyotes, they intrigue me. They intrigue me because I actually thought the idea of the Coyotes selling and Phil Kessel going back to Boston would have been quite the storyline. I thought Phil Kessel to Boston would have actually been a better fit than Taylor Hall of Boston, but
I think
listen, that's just me.
I think it's unfortunate. Like you get like a Devin Dubnyk who used to be a marquee goaltender and now is fallen off. Maybe a bit of age, injuries, depending on I don't know exactly what's going on. but he's not the same goaltender he used to be. And then Colorado ends up acquiring him. That's the same division move. I think a lot of a lot of these deals, in a regular trade deadline where anybody can go anywhere with no restrictions, I think a lot of these moves are a lot different. But I think there were more challenges within this year as opposed to different years, which is like, the salary cap is always going to be an issue. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It was a little tighter than past years, yes, but it's always an issue. But then you have these other situations where if you're not going to have a guy for 7 days or 2 weeks, then you're not even going to make the deal. And I think that was, it would be interesting to know what deals would have been done if there were with no restrictions, which we'll never know. But that might have been one that would have happened on a regular time.
Well, going back to the Dubnyk to Colorado deal, that's because Francois, the backup goalie, he's out for the rest of the season. He actually got the same injury which Varlamov got when he played for Colorado a couple of years ago, where I think it's a torn groin. You have Grubauer, who is now out for the next 2 weeks. He's on the injury reserve for 2 weeks. And then you also have, last year in the playoffs, they lost to Dallas. Was it Dallas? Yeah, they lost to Dallas because they had Michael Hutchinson in net, who was the third string. So here you go. You have this team that scores goals. But again, and here's going to be the Toronto comparison. It doesn't matter how many goals you score if you can't play defense.
Right.
All right.
And that's what the Boston Bruins are facing right now.
Yeah, and the Devin Dubnyk move is so that way it's a second string you have in net and not a third string, because this road was looking awfully familiar to Colorado with the playoffs looming, month away. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So we have a couple minutes left in the show, so let's skip over to the Central Division. So Carolina Hurricanes, Tampa Bay Lightning, and Florida Panthers all have 58 points. And who's going to be number one in that division? And who do you see making the playoffs from the Predators and Blackhawks and Stars?
So if this was yesterday, right? I actually had Dallas, because Dallas had games in hand. Dallas is starting to come on. I had them taking that last spot. But Radulov and Ben Bishop are now hurt, and I believe they're going to miss the rest of the season. And those are two very important pieces to Dallas. So with those two injuries, I really don't see Dallas challenging, even with the games in hand. I don't see them getting hot.
Dallas, 12 OT losses. 12 OT losses. There's no other team in the league who has 10, and they have 12 OT losses. If you look, like, if they end up now making the playoffs, that's going to be one of the big things. Like, how many games they could have actually gotten the extra point in.
Yes. But again, like with Dallas out, I see it sticky in Carolina, Tampa Bay, Florida. I think Nashville is going to be the team that gets in. I think Nashville over St. Louis in that division, right?
No, we got the Predators, Blackhawks, Blue Jackets, yes. Red Wings, and Dallas Stars.
Yes, yeah. Nashville is the team that gets in. I think Chicago is still kind of in a rebuilding phase. I don't see them. Even if Chicago did get in, I don't see much. But again, like Nashville, it was difficult for them to make decisions, because I honestly felt like Nashville should have been selling. Because I don't think Nashville's going to get any better next season.
There was big talk about them moving one of their big defensive pieces.
Ekholm was the piece that they were talking about. And I was all for Ekholm going on the market. Again, he was tied supposedly to Toronto. But, Forsberg was another piece that could have possibly have been on the move. But it's just, David Poyle decides to stand put. And you know what? They're playing with house money, I guess. So, let's see what happens come playoffs. But again, your reward is Carolina, who's been an analytic darling the last couple seasons, and they just seem to be getting better and better and better. They kind of remind me a little bit of the Islanders. Good, but no one talks about them.
Yeah, I think. Well, the Islanders, I think they like it that way, and that's basically one of their strengths is they're just going through, they're putting their hard hats on, and they're just winning games. Like, there's no There's no huge superstar, even though you have like a Matt Barzell who's been doing pretty well.
Another
but,
random stat about them: the two teams in the NHL with the lowest goals against, goals for, goals against. There's only two teams that have under 100 goals scored against them. The second place team is the Isles with 98, and the first place team is Vegas with 96.
All right.
So
That is a fun stat. So speaking of good defense, there is one situation. Well, we only have like a minute or left on the show, but we have to. I have to talk about the NBA. I have to talk about the New York Knicks for a second because right now they're still relevant. They're in sixth place in the Eastern Conference, and their defense. The stat came from the MSG telecast, where the opponent's points per game, they're first in the league in the lowest points per game, 104.2. Opponent's field goal percentage, 44%. That's first in the league. Opponent's three-point percentage is only 34%, which is also first. And they are tied with the most games holding opponents under 100 points with 19. The New York Knicks defense is back.
hey,
And it makes me happy as a Knicks fan. I think it's also good for New York that we have two competitive teams now because we have the Brooklyn Nets who are in a seesaw battle for first place with the Philadelphia.
my whole thing is
76ers.
the Knicks are for real this year. It's they've held it all season. It's not like it started out good and then they tapered away. Like they've been competitive all year. And you know what? As an NBA fan, when the Knicks are good, it's good for the NBA.
Yeah, I think. Well, personally, I like the fact that they've been competitive in a lot of games. A lot of games they've had the leads going into the fourth quarters and then they end up losing. For a young team, that's very atypical of what happens, and then they end up learning, and then they build toward the future. It seems like we're good here. There's a lot of times that there's a lot of there was the 14-win season, there was a 17-win season that it looked like nothing was going to happen, like no free agents are going to come here and things like that. Now it seems like we're building a little something. Now if we get one or two guys, big guys, to come over and be a part of the solution, and you got Julius Randle who's playing like a max player. He's probably going to get a max contract when his time is available. Hopefully he ends up staying with the Knicks for a little while. There's some positivity here finally.
Yeah.
After it seems like decades.
Yeah.
There was that year or two that they had that they were at the top of the division. One time they won the division. I think it was 2013. It's very few and far between. So the fact that they have a defensive structure, which is a winning formula when you have that structure, so to see what happens.
It's all good stuff.
I'm excited, but you also have the Brooklyn Nets, who health is going to be their biggest issue. Right now, they won last night. They had only Kyrie Irving played last night. Now James Harden, who was the one constant, is missing some games now. Kevin Durant's in and out of the
they're
lineup.
still rolling though. Like we'll know about them. I'm not worried about them. Like once the playoffs come, we'll see what they're worth. Like we know what the season is. Is there you got anything else left?
Nah, that's it. I think that's our show for this week. Thank you very much, Sean, for stopping by again.
Of course. Hope to be here some more.
All right, we'll be back next week. LDM Radio Sports Talk. See you next week. Take care.